In this video, we're going to be talking about adding and subtracting fractions. So first we're going to start off with adding. And just to jog your memory a little bit, the top number of a fraction is referred to as the numerator, and the bottom is referred to as the denominator. So first we're going to start out with a very basic type of problem that you'll have with fractions. So if we have something like 1/8 plus 3/8, okay? We can just go ahead and just add the numerators together because our denominators are the same. So this is going to end up being 4/8. Now what you always want to look for before you put something down as your final answer, you want to ask yourself if this can be reduced. And in this case it can. So to reduce a fraction, you ask yourself what is the largest number that the numerator and the denominator can be divided by. In this case it's 4. So when we divide the top by 4, we get 1, and when we divide the bottom by 4, we get 2. So our final answer is actually going to be 1/2. Okay, so now let's take a look at a situation where the denominators are not the same. So let's say we have something like 2/7 plus 1/14, okay? What you want to do in this situation is get what we call the least common denominator. Now, first of all, understand that a common denominator is a number that can be divided by evenly by all of the denominators in the problem. And the least common denominator, which is what we're looking for here, is the lowest one of those numbers. So for this problem, applying this definition, okay, we look at these numbers, okay, and we ask ourselves, okay, what is that number that can be divided by evenly by both? And in this case, it's 14. So because we're going to choose 14 as our least common denominator, this can stay the same. But we have to convert 2/7 to 14ths. So we say 2/7 equals how many 14ths? So in order to do this, we say, okay, 7 goes into 14 how many times? 2 times. So what we do is we take that 2 and we multiply our numerator by that 2. So 2 times 2 gives us 4. Okay, so now we have our, well, I'll put up the new problem over here, which is 1/14 plus 4/14. And that gives us 5/14. And that will be our final answer because we can't reduce that anymore. Okay, so let's look at some problems with mixed numbers. Now, first, let's just review actually improper fractions. So the fractions that we just looked at are what we call proper fractions. So proper fractions are when our numerator is less than our denominator. Okay, an improper fraction is when our numerator is greater than our denominator. So that would be something like 15/4 plus 16/3. We want to change these to a mixed number first. So 4 goes into 15 3 times, and I have 3 left over, and I put that in the numerator, and it's 4. Just so as there's not confusion, let me just do this. I'm actually just going to do this little division problem because I like to be really thorough so that I make sure everyone's following me. So if we looked at this as an actual division problem here, okay, I'm saying 4 goes into 15 3 times, okay? 3 times 4 is 12. And I have a remainder here of 3, okay? This becomes my numerator. So I have this, my answer up here, the 4 goes into 15 3 times. I put that over here. My 3 left over, sorry, this is a little messy, becomes my numerator. And I keep that over 4, the denominator that's in there. I just wanted to actually do that out to show you what was going on. So anyway, so this ends up being, this converts to 3 and 3/4. We have 3 goes into 16, okay, 5 times, and I have 1 left over. So it's 5 and 1/3, okay? Now what I want to do now is just deal with the fractions. Just deal with these guys, the 3/4 and the 1/3, okay? Because we add up the whole numbers separately. So I'm looking now for a common denominator here. I'm dealing with 3/4 and 1/3. So the lowest common denominator, the least common denominator here is going to be 12. So I have to say, okay, 3/4 equals how many 12ths? 4 goes into 12 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. Okay, now for my 1/3, 1/3 equals how many 12ths? 3 goes into 12 4 times. 4 times 1 is 4. So now I'm looking at this situation. I'm adding 9/12 and 4/12, okay? So 9/12 and 4/12 is going to give me 13/12, which happens to be another improper fraction, which I'm going to change to 1 and, 1 and 1/12. Okay, so after adding these fractions together, I get this. I get 1 and 1/12. So I have to go back now and add my whole numbers. So I have, let me write this separately. I now have 3 plus 5 plus 1 and 1/12. So when I add up all my whole numbers here, 3 plus 5 is 8, plus 1 is 9, and then I have 1/12. So when you're dealing with adding the mixed numbers, you deal with the whole numbers separately, and you just look at the fractions to find the common denominator there, the least common denominator, add those together, and then go back and add everything up. And that's it for adding fractions. Now we're going to get into subtracting fractions. Okay, so now let's take a look at subtracting fractions. So in a lot of ways, it's similar to adding fractions. There's just going to be a few minor things that are a little bit different that you need to be aware of. But so if we start out, much like we did with adding the fractions, if we have a situation where our denominators are the same and we have something like 2/4 minus 1/4, we can just straight across subtract the numerators and get 1/4. Let's look at a situation where the denominators are different. So if we have, let's say 7/10 minus 1/2, okay? So these are different, so we have to find our least common denominator, which here is going to be 10, so we can leave that one alone, and we just have to change the 1/2 to be in terms of tenths. So we say 1/2 equals how many tenths? 2 goes into 10 5 times. 5 times 1 is 5. Okay, so now our new problem is going to look like this. 7/10 minus 5/10 equals 2/10. Now this can be reduced to 1/5 because 2 divided by 2 is 1 and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So that's our final answer for that one. All right, let's try one with a mixed number. So let's try 8 and 5, 6. Let's see, 8 and 5, 6 minus 2 and 1, 6. All right, this is pretty straightforward. Again, we're just going to treat the whole numbers separately from the fractions. So let's just take a look at our fractions. Our denominators are the same, so we can just go ahead and subtract our numerators. So 5 minus 1 gives us 4/6, and subtracting our whole numbers gives us 6. We can reduce this to 2/3, because 4 divided by 2 is 2, 6 divided by 2 is 3, and so 6 and 2/3 is our final answer for that one. So let's look at where things start to get a little bit tricky with the subtraction. This is where it ventures off a little bit from addition, but this is something that you have to keep in mind when subtracting fractions. When you have a situation like this, if we have, let's say, 4 and 5/8 minus 1 and 7/8, okay? Now again, as I've said, we treat the whole numbers and the fractions separately, but when we look at our fractions here, they have a common denominator of 8, but we can't subtract 7 from 5, okay? So what we have to do here is something called borrowing. So what I have to do is borrow from the 4. I have to borrow 1 from the 4, so this becomes 3, okay? And we're dealing in terms of eighths here. So that 1 unit, 1, equals 8/8. Okay, because 8 divided by 8 is 1. That's kind of just a little side note. This is how we get to this point. So I say 8/8 plus 5/8 is going to give me 13/8. So now I'm dealing with 3 and 13/8 minus 1 and 7/8. So now these are numbers that I can work with because I can subtract 7 from 13. And when I subtract 7 from 13, I get 6/8, and 3 minus 1 is 2. Now again, we want to reduce here, so we divide it by 2. And when we do that, we get 3. When we divide the numerator and denominator by 2, we get 3/4. Our final answer is 2 and 3/4 for that one. So yeah, I want to go back and just take another look at this piece here because this is something that tends to confuse people. We're borrowing 1 from here, and we're converting that 1 to 8/8 so we can add it to this, because anything divided by itself is 1. So this is the thing that tends to trip people up, is the borrowing when we subtract fractions. Okay, so that's, like I said, that's the one thing that's a little bit tricky with the subtracting that we didn't have to deal with the addition. Okay, so we're going to look at one other type of problem that you might come across, subtracting fractions, that can be a little tricky. If we just have a whole number, if we have 9 minus 2 and 1/4, okay, there's no fraction here, okay? So again, what we're going to do is borrow. So we're going to cross out that 9 and make it an 8. And we're going to use, because we're dealing with fourths here, we're going to change this to 4/4. So this is going to become 8 and 4/4 minus 2 and 1/4. And now we can deal with this. When we look at our whole numbers, 8 minus 2 is 6, and these denominators are the same, so we can just say 4 minus 1, 6 and 3/4. Okay? So this is another tricky one that you might come across. That's why I wanted to make sure I reviewed that with you. And if you'd like more practice with adding and subtracting fractions, feel free to visit the Resources for Teens store, where you can purchase the extended version of this video where I go through and do 10 addition and 10 subtraction problems. All right, good luck.